Hello, welcome to this brief presentation on doing an ethical analysis. For this course, we want to look at a common framework that we will be using for doing an ethical analysis for all of the cases that we will be discussing throughout the course. The ethical analysis framework here has three major components. Part 1 is the moral inquiry and ethical mapping component. Part 2 is the options development and analysis, or creating alternatives component. And Part 3 is the decision and action planning component. Now, the first part of our ethical analysis framework is the moral inquiry ethical mapping component, and it has four subcomponents. A, what are the facts of the situation? And how do those facts and our understanding and interpretation of those facts color our understanding of the case? B, what legal considerations, if any, are relevant to the situation? C, what prudential considerations are relevant to the situation? And by prudential considerations, we're thinking of practical matters that a decision maker would normally take into account as they are evaluating the circumstance or this particular situation. And D, what ethical considerations need to be taken into account? That is, how do we understand how to tease out the ethical issues in this particular situation? The second major component of doing an ethical analysis involves options development and analysis, or creating alternatives. And this basically involves three steps. First, we want to identify somewhere between 3 to 5 morally acceptable options for resolving the situation, so that these can be analyzed to determine which is best. Second, we want to then determine which of these options has the most compelling moral justification for action, or the one that is consistent with your own personal ethical code of conduct. And then finally, we want to analyze the leading candidates or ethically optimal approaches for action against other important prudential criteria, such as financial consequences, feasibility, strategic outcomes, or the ability of participants to carry out the option. The final component of doing an ethical analysis involves decision and action planning, and we adopt a short-term versus long-term perspective in approaching this final component. First, we need to determine the initial decision as presented by the case. And second, looking more from a long-term perspective, what would a full action plan look like? So once we have determined, okay, given the parameters of this case, my own ethical values, and the analysis that was laid out earlier in the first two steps, what do I do in this situation? And then let's step back and ask the question, in the future, if we were to avoid this from happening again, or to deal with this in a more effective manner, what sorts of things would need to be put in place? That would be our full action plan. Hopefully this framework will be helpful to you in thinking through the different cases that you're going to be analyzing throughout the course. And that brings us to the end of this presentation on doing an ethical analysis.